Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for our webinar called Web Content Strategy for Libraries. I'm Jamie Machik with the Nicolay Federated Library System. We're almost finished with our spring schedule. We have the webinar this morning. We have one more tomorrow, and then we start anew in summer and fall. So that's pretty exciting. We're going to go ahead and get started. Our presenter today is Nina McHale. And Nina is currently the Digital Experience Consultant for the Colorado State Library based in Denver. Nina, at one point, did web content development at the Arapahoe Library District and the University of Colorado Denver's Aurora Library. In 2012, she was named a Tech Leader, Mover, and Shaker. She received her MA and MSLS in English and Library Information Science from the Catholic University of America in 2002. She is actually a Wisconsin native. She started her life in La Crosse, and now she lives in Denver with her husband, 3 kids, and 2 dogs. So Nina, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jamie. I tried to get my camera to come up. Do you see that, Jamie?
I am not seeing it.
No.
Not right now. I'm not seeing it.
All right.
There it is.
Maybe. Oh, did it? Okay. So can you see me now?
I see you now.
Okay. Okay. There I am. And let me make sure that my slides are visible as well. Good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can resize this screen a little bit. Maybe I'll just close it and get started, and I can bring it up at the end when we do some questions and answers. Okay. Okay. Can you still see me? It says now that we've hidden the webcams.
I can still see you, but you might want to put the show in full screen mode.
Okay. Yep. I will do that. There we go. Okay. Here we go.
Perfect.
All right. Let's get started. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. I'm glad we have a great crowd, it sounds like, to listen and chat about web content strategy this morning. We're going to go through, let me have a slide here of what our agenda is. I want to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A, and we're going to go through, I'll just give sort of a little kind of a lecture style, what is content strategy. We'll talk about seminal works in content strategy. Content strategy is not a strictly a library-based thing. It's something that exists in the sort of greater world of web development. And Kissane, this person that's mentioned here in the second bullet point, is an author who's written pretty extensively on it. So we'll talk about her roles for content strategy and how that applies to libraries. As I mentioned, it's something that was developed outside of libraries in the web development world, but has a lot of good lessons, I think, for libraries. Then we're going to talk about defining content, and this is defining web content. This is breaking your website down into all the little pieces, all the little chunks that make up the whole, and really sort of looking at it, analyzing it, and figuring out what the best way to develop, manage, and in the end, ultimately retire it will be. And then we're going to talk about content workflow in terms of people's time, who creates content and why, how are they involved in the process. Maybe you write copy, but you don't actually ever post anything to the web. Maybe you're the web person and your role is more technical, so you're getting content from other people and putting it on the web. We'll talk about how to really sort of analyze that and hammer it out so that you have a good understanding and everyone knows who's doing what when on the website. And then we'll talk about web governance. And I have an example from when it's from an academic library. I know my audience today is you all are primarily public, but I want to give an example for an academic library. And this is an area that I really want to talk about how things are going with governance in your libraries. This is something that I think we could get a lot out of in the FAQ or in the Q&A, sorry, at the end, wrong acronym. And then finally, I'll walk through these examples of these major areas that we've discussed, talking about the features slideshow on the website that I built for Arapahoe Library District last year. And if you want to bring up, if you have a laptop or something, if you want to follow along during that part, the URL is arapahoelibraries.org, or you can just Google Arapahoe Libraries and that'll get you there too. So let's talk about what content strategy is. As I mentioned, it's a sort of a growing discipline within the web world unto itself. Not specifically a library thing, but again, that doesn't mean that we can't use it as librarians. A little more on that in a minute. It's also how and sometimes when you say what you say on your website. What is the voice? What is the tone? What are the marketing messages? Is there consistency in all of that on the website? How do you get there? How do you get to that when you have, several people contributing content or working on the technical parts? How do you achieve that? Content strategy is also a mix of branding and editing. If you look at the works, and we'll get to that slide. I hope I have it in here. I think it's next. I will point you to two books that really get really in-depth defining content strategy and the roles, all of that kind of thing. But my takeaway from reading those books, really, this is kind of branding and editing. We're talking about how we want to present ourselves on the web to our patrons, and editing and making sure things are consistent, that we're presenting this sort of unified presence of the library. And then finally, putting it all into perspective, we always want to go back to our end users, our patrons, and content strategy is a way that we can ensure a consistent experience on the website for our end users. So I mentioned these two works. These are two seminal works for content strategy. One is called Content Strategy for the Web, written by Christina Halverson, and the second is The Elements of Content Strategy, written by Erin Kissane. These are short reads. They're maybe 100 pages apiece, and they're really practical, and I really like them a lot because they just made sense. It really puts work on the web into kind of an editorial workflow, which is something that as librarians, as sort of educators, we're maybe a little more familiar with. And when you look at it in that light, it really sort of simplifies things and gives you sort of an, okay, I can do this feeling. This is, it's the website, it's just writing copy, it's presenting things in a slightly different way. But if we apply these sort of editorial techniques to web development, it makes a lot of sense and restores a lot of sanity, I think, in my experience. All right, so let's look at, this is Christina Halverson's definition of content strategy. And the sort of notion of content strategy originated in this blog post that she wrote. You can see the link at the bottom of the slide here. It's a great website called A List Apart. Really sort of practical, hands-on information about web development and developing websites for the end user, in our case, library patrons. So her definition, based on this sort of seminal blog post from, I want to say it was about 2009, is that content strategy plans for the creation, publication, and governance of useful, usable content. And for a lot of libraries, and for me too, for a lot of libraries and librarians, the web wasn't what I set out to do. I was originally in reference and instruction, and I sort of got handed the web when one of my colleagues several jobs ago left for personal reasons, and that was sort of what she had done. So we've kind of, and I'm not picking on anybody, because I know this is the case for a lot of my colleagues, even colleagues who work at really big academic libraries and really big library districts. We sort of fell into the web. We have sort of a frame of reference for reference, and a frame of reference for tech services and all the more sort of librarian-y stuff we do. But the website is still, even 10, 15 years in, the website is still kind of an afterthought. We don't have sort of the policies and procedures and rules, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean that in a sort of a structural sense. Think of it as like a scaffold that helps us get our work done.
Nina?
And yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to ask, so why do you think that is, that we don't give the web a lot of thought? Because I find that with a lot of marketing things too, just in presenters I've had and just in talking to people. Why is all this stuff, in your opinion, an afterthought?
A lot of it is just because of the way, just sort of time and place. Web content management systems like Drupal and WordPress, and I know a lot of you are on Drupal, and I think that's fabulous. Those types of things really started coming into their own, like I want to say 2007, 8, 9, and that was also the time that libraries, that the overall sort of economy started crashing, library budgets were reduced, and
okay.
a lot of libraries are struggling to keep the doors open and even keep staff on hand, and staffing never really grew to reflect, I don't think, general IT needs, not just web needs. within libraries. And when you have libraries struggling to just, keep the lights on, keep the doors open, trying to maintain sort of core library services like reference, like just simple acquisitions, buying books, processing books, getting them to the shelf. I think collectively we were all struggling just to do that. And now that we're sort of pulling out of it, now that things are sort of, the economy sort of stabilizing again, I think I've been seeing, I know, a lot more job descriptions, a lot more job postings for web and tech positions. And I think it was just that combination of web stuff got sort of easier because of content management systems and that kind of thing, right at the time when libraries really were not looking to, or were really not able to expand beyond, and even just in some cases maintain core services. So I think we're still kind of playing catch up, and I think it's happening at a pretty good rate now. And that's one thing that I'd like to talk to all the attendees about, is just sort of find out what your web staffing model is, who is doing this. And I know a lot of times it's a reference librarian who, maybe can take 10 or 15 minutes out of his or her day to, post a new blog post or put a new image up or put a new event in the calendar or something like that. And content strategy is one way that I see that we can sort of build those skills in. And let me skip ahead because I have a slide, I think, that answers your question pretty well, Jamie. So the slide here is Wherefore content strategy in libraries. Why do we need it in libraries? And for these other areas that I've mentioned, like for reference and public services, we have the reference interview. We have customer service, skills and standards that we can develop that inform us, that tell us how to do our jobs, that give us a benchmark, a way to see how we're doing. Are we meeting our needs? Are we meeting our institutional goals? And in tech services, we have cataloging standards. I mentioned here the AACR2 and MARC record, and of course we have DOE and Library of Congress. We have all of these standards that have been, sort of in existence for decades that provide us with sort of, again, sort of the notion of like scaffolding for this is the basic structure of how we do our job and we operate within this structure. And IT staff who do sort of networking or manage the network or systems administrations and desktop stuff. They have recognized industry standards as well. They're not necessarily library standards, but it's something that they can sort of go to. And for the people who are working on the web, whether you're a full-time web person or whether you're that reference librarian who sort of struggles to carve out, a couple minutes a day to sort of look at the website and see, is there any new content that needs to go up? Are there any events that we need to advertise? I think content strategy can provide us with that guidance in how we develop and publish and sort of manage web content.
Thanks for answering that. Yeah, thank
sure.
you. I felt it was timely, so I wanted to ask.
Thanks for putting that in there. And again, I'd like to talk to attendees about what sort of your web and IT situation is, and I'm just curious as to how it is in Wisconsin versus here too, because in my position now at the state library, I'm working with a lot of groups like you attendees today who are public libraries who really want to do the best they can with what they have to provide great services for their patrons. And I work in a branch of the state library. It's called Networking and Resource Sharing, where we help develop websites for libraries who don't have dedicated web staff. And the goal with what we do with this project is we take libraries who don't have any website at all, give them a website, and then we sort of graduate them through these different sort of levels of service. And then the end goal is ultimately, the ideal is that in the end you will have had a website, we'll train you how to use it, and then eventually after a couple of years you'll get to the point where you can manage it yourself and sort of graduate from the, it's called the COOL program, Colorado Online Libraries.
So with that said, if all of you would just take a second, throughout this presentation, and it doesn't have to be now, but at some point in your question box, maybe type in if you are the web person or if you are, like Nina said, the reference person or someone out who carves out that time. Was the web something you were trained to do? Was it something that was kind of given to you and you've been trained on? Dropped in your lap, like I'm sure for a lot of it. So just maybe comment on that, and we'll talk more about that at the end. So thank you.
Okay, so let me back up a couple slides here. Let's see, so we talked about this one. We talked about how it plans for creation, publication, and governance of useful, usable content. And one other point I thought of, and I think it was relative to this slide, think of it as, think of content strategy as sort of a collection development policy for your website. Because if you think about how we create collection and development policies for sort of the physical content in our libraries. We talk about, when we make a collection development policy, what do people want? What format is that in? Do we buy books for them? Do we buy journals? Do we buy magazines? And of course, this is going to vary depending not only on the type of library that you work for, but also your community in a public library. If you're serving, I can't think of any really good examples, but I think you all know what I mean. You really want to keep the needs of your patrons and of your community at the heart of this collection development policy. So the way that you manage the physical content within your library, I think there's a good parallel to how you manage sort of the digital content on your website as well. And this also includes weeding. A good content development, or collection development policy for a library will also pretty clearly stipulate when items should be removed from the collection, when the information is outdated, if the information, or if a book or the container of the information becomes so badly damaged that you can't use it anymore. You need to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff and get rid of that so that you can keep your collection healthy. And anyone who's ever gone through any web redesign or revamp knows what I'm talking about. You think, okay, this is great. We'll get in there, we'll give it a fresh look, give it some new colors, put the new library logo on it. And then you get in there and you see all the content and you see all of these files from 2008, and this was a one-time event, and do we really need this PDF still to be up here about this summer reading in 2010 or something like that. So content strategy also helps you manage, and we'll touch on that in the governance part of this. It also helps you manage, it helps you sort of weed the digital content from your website that you don't need anymore. And it helps you sort of prepare for that. It helps you, I use a lot of house analogies. If you think of, okay, so let's say your basement is a mess, and you go through and you organize your basement, and then you have a place for everything and everything in its place, and eventually that kind of starts breaking down. So when you organize the basement, it's like when you launch the new website, all the files are where they're supposed to be, you only have exactly what you need, you've just donated or gotten rid of a bunch of stuff. But then, we sort of get lazy, and instead of maybe going down to the basement, maybe we or our kids or our spouses will say, oh, I'll take care of this later, and they just sort of, toss stuff down the stairs. And then your system kind of starts breaking down. So what content strategy is in this sort of analogy with the basement is your organization scheme for the basement. Everybody's winter boots go over here, we store out-of-season coats here, this goes here, toys go over here, clothes we don't wear anymore go here. If you have, shelving and everything set up where all this stuff goes, you can manage it a lot better, and life is just more sane, I find. Okay, so let's talk about what content strategy is not. And when I prepped for this presentation, I asked Jamie for a list of all of your libraries, and I wanted to take a look at your library website so that I could make sure that I was presenting this topic in a way that was immediately relevant and practical for you all. And I was really pleased to see that a lot of you are using Drupal. I know I saw one Joomla site, a couple of different technologies, but every site that I looked at was in a content management system, and I think that's fantastic. We've come a long way from managing sort of static HTML web pages, and just to have sort of that sort of critical mass of libraries in Drupal or in Joomla or in WordPress, I think is fantastic. But it's important to realize that while your CMS, your content management system, again, whether you're using Drupal, Joomla, WordPress, that is a critical part of your content strategy, but it is not your only content strategy. And I just love this quote from Erin Kissane, and she's the author of The Elements of Content Strategy, one of those 2 books that I showed you. And her quote is that hoping a content management system will replace human care and attention to web content is about as effective as pointing a barn full of unmanned agricultural machinery at a field, going on vacation, and hoping it all works out. So you got to have the tools to do the job. You got to have your tractors. You got to have, all of your, in this analogy, all of your farm equipment to make the farm run. You need to have your content management system. You need to have people who can get in there and take care of it. You need people with those skills. But if you do not provide it with that human care and attention, again, like the basement analogy, it's all going to sort of break down. And you'll go downstairs and you'll think, well, that was a waste of time last spring when I went in and, cleaned everything up and organized it all. So it requires, you can't just sort of throw your website into Drupal and forget it and it's taken care of now. Drupal, again, or Joomla or WordPress, helps make that a lot easier. That's sort of your organizational strategy. But these things do, of course, need human care and attention throughout. Otherwise, your system, no matter how beautiful it was when you set it up, will eventually sort of start to erode and in the end, unfortunately, fail. So, okay, I'm going to skip over this slide. We talked about this already, the Wherefore content strategy in libraries. And we're going to move on now to talking about, I mentioned we're going to talk about Aaron Kissane's roles. And this is related to, as I mentioned, just sort of applying an editorial model to web content development. And again, I think this helps a lot of people because we're more familiar with sort of the process of editing physical documents. Maybe you wrote an article, maybe you wrote papers when you were in graduate school. That sort of process feels very familiar. And we can sort of adapt and adopt that process to developing web content as well. So the 4 roles in Kissane's content strategy model are editors, curators, marketers, and information pros. And keep in mind too, again, that she's not a librarian, so these are terms that she's using for web development generally, not specifically in a library. So like, for example, I look at this as a librarian and I see information pros, and I think, oh, that means librarians. Well, we're all librarians. But think of it specifically in terms of how each of these roles are defined. So let's do that now. So an editor is someone who is knowledgeable and has been trained in how to write for the web. Writing for the web is something that could be not only its own webinar, but it could be an entire course, and I know it is in some places. I highly recommend that if no one in your library has looked into that, to just doing some basic sort of professional development. There's some good books I can recommend if this is something that people are interested in. There are often a lot of sort of webinars of this type locally or at conferences, that kind of thing, where you can get sort of trained in this skill. And it's not difficult, but it definitely is an acquired skill. And again, if no one in your library has ever taken any training or done any sort of personal development, even just reading a simple book, a high-quality book about writing for the web would help. Your editor is also someone who will understand the audience and knows how to write for that audience. And as librarians, oftentimes we get weighed down in our own sort of technical jargon. We talk about the catalog and about periodicals, and we use terms that the average person doesn't understand. So we need to make sure that we can translate this sort of lingo, this professional lingo that we use, into something that the audience can relate to. So the editor is someone who knows how to do those things. A curator is curator is your idea person. It's someone who says, hey, wouldn't it be great if, we had a blog on the website, or wouldn't it be great if we put this on the website, or if we started, allowing patrons to review books or rate them with stars or something like that. So your curator is someone who's going to come up with these great new things that you can put on your website. And sometimes this can be frustrating because I know, and I've worked in mostly medium-sized academic libraries and then the one large library district. And even with, 80 people in an academic library and 300 people in our district, you have a lot of people who are curators who, go to conferences and they come back and they see these ideas or say, hey, look, my friend at this library district is doing this. It can be frustrating if you're this idea person and there's not a lot of technical support for the web in your library, because you might have a great idea for something that seems really simple and like a really quick win, but you might not have the technical skills in-house or a way to sort of budget for or outsource that. That's just sort of a caveat, I guess, for the curators, for the idea people. Then you have the marketers, and when I moved to a public library, just having a marketing department was something just sort of new and exciting for me, so I was very glad to have them on hand. Marketing is something that doesn't get done as much in academic libraries, but I think it's an important part of how do we get the marketing staff into working with us to produce the web. And in a lot of public libraries, I know marketing is the marketing department sort of owns the website. These are people, the marketers, who know how to communicate with the customers, or the ones who have established, already established sort of methods of communication. Maybe there's a newsletter that goes out. Maybe you use a product like Constant Contact or something like that to sort of get the message out to promote what's going on with your library's programs, services, that kind of thing. And typically in libraries, the marketing people are not the ones who are doing usability testing and outreach, but again, in this sort of web development-centric model, Kissane counts the marketers as the people who are doing, well, certainly marketers in libraries do outreach activities, but not so much necessarily usability testing. That typically tends to fall more on either public services or web/IT staff. Again, depending on where and how the web is managed in your organization. And then finally, information pros, and again, that doesn't necessarily mean librarians. These are the people who are building the website. These are the people who, whoever manages or maintains your Drupal site. And I know a lot of times there can be sort of lines drawn through that. It might be an external IT department. It might be your city or your county, or in an academic setting, it might be your campus IT that manages all that. And I know a lot of times librarians and library staff don't have access to what they want or need to do. But these are the people who are going to be developing the workflow for everyone and sort of managing and making sure that the basement organization system stays, keeps working and is sane, and everyone can find their winter boots and knows where to put their coats when the season is over. Okay, so I think I was gonna try to have a little discussion here, but maybe we'll save this, looking at the time, maybe we'll save this for the end. I want you to think about, before we have some discussion at the end, I want to think about who are your editors, who are the people that fill Kissane's roles in your libraries. And there can be a lot of overlap. Think about who are your editors, your curators, your marketers, and your info pros. And I have sort of two parenthetical sentences at the bottom here. So obviously in a smaller library environment there's going to be overlap. Maybe your director is the one who does the web page because that's the only person who can find time and make it work. Or that person is the only one who's had any experience or access to developing websites. So if these roles overlap a little bit, that's okay. But then the other sort of more serious one is if no one is doing these things, then that's less okay. And we'll talk a little bit more, hopefully at the end in the Q&A, about how, again, I'd like to hear how you all are sort of managing this and what's working and what's maybe not working so well in this department. Okay, so let's move on to defining content. And when you're looking at defining content, the four things that you're going to focus on are your audience, the scope of that content, what you want the outcome of interaction, of patron interaction with that content to be, and frequency. How often do these things get updated? How often should they get updated? And I know sometimes that doesn't always, sometimes how often they should and how often they are. The reality is that maybe we don't have time to update things as much as we should, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. So going back to your primary audience, when you're writing content, when you're writing text or developing images, graphics, that kind of thing for the web, you need to step back and think, okay, who is this content for? And a lot of times, again, as I sort of mentioned, we get sort of sucked into, librarians have our own jargon, our own way of speaking. A lot of times we write things for librarians, not for our end user. And that's, again, what, if you take any sort of training on writing for the web, that's one of the things that I think that helps with, the training for writing for the web. Then you want to talk about the scope. What kind of content, if we're going to, if we're thinking about launching a blog, what is the scope of that? What elements are we going to need for an individual blog post? Are we going to need, we should probably have a picture of something that the blog post is talking about. Are we going to have, individual authors? So we'll need like an author byline. What are sort of the pieces of what will I see on the screen? If it's a blog post, will I see a picture, a byline? Maybe I can, have a little tag cloud for my blog about that tags all the contents of the blog. And then obviously the body, the text of the blog post. And then you want to think about the interactivity outcome. So what do we want to happen when someone interacts with this piece of web content? What do we want to happen when the primary audience interacts with it? What is the purpose of our putting the content up there? And again, I think a lot of times we get sort of caught up in our own role as librarians and as library staff, and we post things in ways that we talk about them and we interact with them. And focusing on the interactivity outcome can help with that too. It sort of shifts your thinking to, okay, what do we want the patron to do after they click on this link, or when they read this information, or when they interact with this service. Oops, that's a dog. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry about that, I'm at home today, and that was an enthusiastic Australian Shepherd puppy bursting into the room. Okay, so, and then finally, I think I sort of mentioned all my points here. How often does this content need to be freshened up to prevent it from getting stale? And when and where is it relevant to our users? When will they be looking for this type of information about this new service or this new collection or this summer reading program? When and where and how do they want to access that information? Okay, so let's talk about, now that we've talked about defining our content, let's talk about workflows. So once you have all those pieces and you know what the pieces, and I'll bring all this together in an example in the end. I'm sort of rushing through this, and I'll tie it all together with an example from the Arapahoe Library website. So once you have all the content pieces defined, you can talk about workflow. Who's going to create all these pieces? Let's say I really want to write blog posts, but I don't have any experience manipulating digital images, so I really can't do that. So is that something that marketing could help me out with? And then we sort of work together to put together the pieces of this content. And the benefits of hammering out a workflow like this, obviously, if you communicate what the expectations for everyone are, what the expectations for everyone involved in the process are, everyone will know what to expect, when things are going to happen, when they need to do something, when the ball is passed to them, how that works. And it will also communicate obligation to the responsible parties and also to their management, because if you're working, and this is a way that web work in libraries is different than, say, like reference or technical services or acquisitions. Web work really cuts across department lines more than I think any other type of library work. And if you're managing, and this is a position I found myself in a lot, my job was to build and sustain a great website. And I needed content from about 20 colleagues. But these were not people that I managed. These were not people whose time belonged to me in any way. So we had to sort of hammer out this agreement so that they knew what to do when, so that they could pass their content to me, or make sure that I was building workflow in a way that they could add content to the website themselves without any specialized technical knowledge. And Drupal and content management systems go a long way towards that. But it also sort of sorts out responsibility for who does what when. And again, often if you're the person who's managing the website, you may not have authority over people who are creating this content in order to get your own job done, and that can be tricky. So you also need to have these discussions with the stakeholders and make sure that it reflects everyone's understanding of what's going on. And it seems like a lot of busy work up front, but once you get this stuff sort of hammered out, then the workflow flows and you're able to maintain and keep refreshing and updating your content in a timely way. That makes sense. And then it doesn't end up, sort of taxing anyone. If you have, let's say you're writing blog posts and, you forget to tell the marketing people, oh, I need images for this. Well, then you've just got blog posts sort of stacking up and you're not really doing anything with them. And with a blog post, it's something that's going to be very short and timely. And if you don't post a blog post right away, it's going to be out of date within maybe even a day or two, depending on what you're blogging about. So it makes life saner and easier for everyone, I guess, is sort of the main point here. Okay, so when you have these workflow discussions with all the people involved, and again, this could be someone from programming, it could be someone from marketing, it could be someone from reference. It will usually include the web people, but then a lot of this content, again, is going to be coming from all these different areas across the library. And I say different areas across the library, and in a library district like Arapahoe where there's 300 people, there's going to be a lot of people involved. But looking at those roles, you might realize, well, wait a minute, those roles are only 2 people in my library. I'm doing these 3 things, and then there's one other person who does, in marketing, who creates the graphics or something like that. And maybe you don't even have a marketing department. So when you talk about workflow, when you sit down and have meetings about this, you need to name the specific parts of the website so that you're not saying, oh, hey, did anyone upload the little doohickey with the image over there where the little, the picture of the library is, and underneath that little thing that needs updated? Name the parts of your website. Define them, describe them. What can you call them to make, so you know what you're talking about, so everyone is communicating clearly about these different pieces. Hammer out who are the responsible parties. And again, this is particularly important if you are in charge of this new content, if you're in charge of coordinating what information about events gets posted on the website, you need to make sure that your colleagues have an understanding of when they're involved with that. Frequency of updates, if it's something like a blog, you're going to want to do it at least probably like once a week, once every 2 weeks at the bare minimum, because otherwise with a blog, think about your users' expectations. With a blog, it's something we expect to update frequently. And if you look at a blog and see that the library staff haven't posted anything in 3 or 4 months, it's going to be kind of stale content, and think about yourself as an end user. If a website that you visit a lot doesn't have any new content, you're going to kind of get bored with it and sort of move on and forget about it. And then you're going to really want to think about and map out which staff, who does what, when. Think about the staff time required. And these are things that should be really written into job descriptions. If you have a reference librarian who sort of took on the website because he or she wanted to, then if that starts taking up 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% of that person's time, you need their job description to accurately reflect that. You need all of this documented. We'll talk about this a little bit more in governance. And thank you. You want to make sure that everyone has the tools they need to do their job when they're expected to do their job. Okay, I'm just looking at the time here, and again, I want to leave a lot of questions, a lot of time for Q&A. So I think I'm going to spend less time on my example from Auraria because it's from an academic library anyway, and I know most, if not all of you, are public library staff. So let's talk, we'll define governance quickly, and then we'll talk about how that applies and sort of builds on everything that we've done so far. So here's a long description from the Federal Web Managers Governance and Operations Council. And that is, they say that web governance is the structure of people, positions, my control panel here a little bit, authorities, roles, responsibilities, relationships, and rules involved in managing an agency's website or websites. The governance structure defines who can make what decisions, who's accountable for which efforts, and how each of the players must work together to operate a website and a web management process effectively. And I would add efficiently here too, because you don't want, for all the people who are working on the web, regardless of what their parts are, you don't want it to be onerous. You want the whole process to be efficient. You want when something new is initiated from start to finish, you want it to go as smoothly as possible, to be a positive experience for everyone, and to result in a good user experience on the website at the end. Okay, and this is, okay, I knew I mentioned this elsewhere in my slides too. So again, think of governance as sort of a collection policy for your site. It dictates, in the purchasing of physical products, it dictates, what you buy, for whom you buy, how much of your budget is allocated towards children's stuff, how much of it is allocated towards this. It dictates how you spend your time developing your collection, to grow it, to manage it, and then ultimately to sort of lead it at the end. Okay, and as I mentioned, I'll leave these, well, these slides are obviously in here. This is about, I call it the Great LibGuides fail of 2009 at Auraria Library. And basically, in a nutshell, what happened is that we launched LibGuides, and that was our library's first content management system for the web. And we came up with all these best practices, but no one wanted to adhere to them, and they were never fully vetted or implemented. So the end result was that LibGuides ended up being sort of just a big visual mess. The information architecture and the navigation weren't consistent. There was no consistency in design or layout, that kind of thing. This is all what content strategy is sort of designed to prevent. And the end result for library staff was frustrated web administrators, frustrated librarians, and really interested users. We put this term developing content, and people weren't really sort of acting with it. So, okay. Again, I think I'll spend a few minutes on this here. I've sort of already touched on this, but thinking across the organization, who are the people, positions, the role in your content governance? Do you have a librarian, or is you in 10% of your time as the reference technical system? Do you have a designer? Do you have someone in marketing? So look at try to see out where are these skills sort of in job descriptions, abilities, that kind of thing. So identify where these are, and think about applying that back to your work process and see how that carousel. Again, the importance of naming the pieces of the website. This is the events carousel here. So this area sort of flips through automatically these 4 things that are posted here. So these could be programs, these could be resources. Sometimes we would feature a database. This is patron picks, books picked by patrons for patrons. The 4th one down here is need free Wi-Fi, come to a library, so it just links to more details about how to get to free Wi-Fi. Oops. So let's go back and define this content the way we did earlier. Our primary audience for this is patrons. Sometimes you have content where, maybe sometimes it's for library staff and patrons. This is pretty obviously for patrons. It's things that we want to market and advertise to them. The scope of this content is qualitative selection and timely promotion of services and or events and classes or campaigns, anything special that's going on, summer reading, anything that's longer or bigger than like a one-time author event or something like that. And this is actually wrong. It was initially 5 items, but we reduced it to 4. And the scope of it is that it's this graphical presentation, this main sort of graphic here, with a click-through. So when I click on this, it's going to take me to the part of the website that shows, hey, look, did you know that you can review books for other people? Or did you know that if you want book reviews by your fellow patrons who read these things, you can find them here? Okay, so the other things that this feature carousel did, the way we defined it, the interactivity outcome, what did we want to happen? We wanted that. We wanted it to be sort of graphically interesting because we wanted it to provide a hook into an experience with the library, whether digital or physical. Maybe it was, hey, did you know we have ebooks? And then it would take them to more information about ebooks. Or maybe it was, hey, look, we're having these dancers in the library, and this is an event, so it brings them into a physical event in the library. And ultimately, too, on the website, we wanted to pull them into the website and get them to explore the website a little bit more. Because often, a lot of times, in my experience in public libraries, people come, they look at the catalog, and then that's primarily what they're there to do. They want to check their holds, they want to view account information, that kind of thing. So we really wanted to get them into the other parts of the library website. And frequency in this case, we committed to updating it multiple times per week, just to keep that information fresh, to keep it sort of flowing through so people would sort of come back to that. And again, get them hooked into the library website and to get them circulating throughout the website and experiencing more of the web content that we put up there. So I've touched on this. I think I'll go through this briefly. So basically it was whoever wanted to promote something in that space could come up with content, whether it was the programming department, reference, material services, you name it, we can promote it. So that request came from the external, whatever department wanted to promote this, went to marketing, and marketing would provide graphics and copy for that. And then the web team would be the information pros role in Kissane's model to get the graphics, the copy-related pages put up. And one thing that we did do, we sort of would sometimes push things back to marketing and say, hey, I made some edits here for writing for the web, because the marketers were skilled in sort of branding and disseminating information more traditionally in print. And the web team, the 5 of us, had more practice writing things for the web. So we would sometimes push copy back and say, hey, can you approve these changes? We felt that, we just really wanted to streamline this for web consumption, because people don't read a lot on websites. Think about the way you use a website. We tend to skim, and things need to be sort of chunked up and broken into smaller pieces. And in print, you don't necessarily need to do that as much. But again, so this is just one of the ways that the different elements, the different departments here at Arapahoe sort of work together and sort of push back and forth. And one thing we did not do in terms of governance is we didn't determine the life cycle of this content. We didn't decide, okay, if it's an event, it'll be taken down after the event. Or, do we want to archive events? Do we want to leave that content in the website so that people can see, oh, wow, look, they really do a lot of, author events. They do a lot of these kind of events. We didn't go through and apply that sort of best practice collection development policy to the content. But otherwise, we sort of worked out a process, and we used our existing ticketing system within the library district. And again, I know that's a luxury, an online ticketing system that a lot of smaller libraries don't even have. But if you build a workflow that sort of notifies people when in the process they're supposed to be doing these things, that will make life easier for everyone. People know, okay, they're ready for the graphics from the marketing person, so I make the graphic and then pass it on to the web people. And then when the web people get that information, even if it's just an email with the graphic attached, you can say, okay, it's time for this to go up on the web. Okay, so it is 9:48, so we have some time for Q&A. And again, I'd like to hear, I'd really like to hear how you all sort of manage the web in your libraries. And just by sort of looking at your websites, I kind of gathered that a lot of you are not the size of an Arapahoe library district with 300 staff. And if you have any questions about, the way I've presented some of this is on a much larger scale in libraries that have a lot of these, distinct marketing and reference. And I know in smaller libraries, you have people who wear 4 or 5 hats just in the course of a day. So I'd like to hear your questions, and then we can talk about how there might be different approaches to applying some of these concepts and techniques to managing your web content. So Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi. Sorry about we had a little tech issue there. Nina, your audio was really choppy, and so I turned off your webcam, and then for some reason when I did that, I almost got kicked off. And if I get kicked off, that means nobody can listen to you. So, but luckily I got back on, and you're cutting out a little bit right now, and I'm not sure why, because I turned off everything, so you might want to close your webcam. Okay. No, you're still choppy.
Okay. Yeah, it's turned off. Yeah, I have it off here. I don't know what else. Sorry.
It could just be a little glitch, which happens from time to time.
Yeah.
Now you sound a little bit better. I did have a couple questions come in. One of them was, let's say you perform all these roles with your website, plus you do the IT, keeping the website up, or you omit some roles because you don't have time. So how do you find the time to do things the right way? How do you switch from doing it by the seat of your pants or doing it in a well thought out manner? And how do you manage management's expectations with all of this?
This has been sort of the theme of my career. As I mentioned, I started out, the big thing is the way I would go after it. If you're the person who's doing all of this, you need to communicate the scope of all of this. I mean, it starts up easy. It's easy to put the website up, say this, but all the care is being and everything. It's like a puppy that just stormed into the room a couple minutes ago. It's easy to get the puppy, but then you've got the puppy for 16 years, and how do you manage all this? And what I would do is have a conversation with management, and this is how I dealt with it in the past. One of my jobs was at Georgetown University, and I 30% of the time was supposed to be, built into my annual performance plan and my job duties and my job description. 30% of it in web development, and it was more like 110% of my time was doing web development. And the job description really just did not match what I was doing day to day. And my supervisor was saying, well, we've just got these 2 other projects, and then we'll be done with web stuff, and then you can, focus more on your reference and instruction duties, that kind of thing. And I pointed out to him, I said, keep a record of what you do every day. If you're spending 3 hours of your time managing web content or doing Drupal updates or something like that, management doesn't know necessarily everything that goes into how much time it actually takes. And there's always a big disconnect there between sort of a cognitive disconnect of, what's on the website, how did it get there. It might seem like a really simple blog post, but maybe it took 4 hours to prepare. So I would keep, if you're that person who's wearing all of those hats and you want to reclaim some sanity and have a weekend again, log how much time you're doing. And if it says, 10% of your time is the website, if you can show, okay, I worked 40 hours this week, and about 20 of that was on the website. And if you can sort of document and just show people everything that goes on. A lot of times management doesn't realize, they see the final product on the screen and it looks very simple, but they might not know everything you had to do to Drupal or WordPress behind the scenes to get whatever that, to display whatever that is. So document. And then what I did when I was at Georgetown was I wrote up a recommendation that said, okay, I need at least 50% of my time or you know what, I think I suggested 70% web, 30% reference, and they came back with 50-50, and I took that because it was kind of all I can do. So just really open lines of communication, make sure that everyone knows what you're doing, how complicated it is, what's involved, and then maybe the management too can think of, well, okay, you know, if you don't want to do this part all the time, maybe the management can look at, since the management has sort of the broader perspective of everyone's plates, maybe they can sort of distribute that more.
Great. Another question is, do you have a way to keep an eye on what content is on your website or comments being made on other media instead of having to visit each part separately?
I would ask, and I know I looked sort of behind the scenes at a lot of the sites for the audience today. Web analytics is the key to that, to sort of determining where people are coming from, what's getting looked at. My colleague, Tabby Farney, who's a professor at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and also a Midwesterner from Illinois originally, she and I wrote a book, Web Analytics for Information Professionals. And if you want to know what's going on behind the scenes, you know, where are you getting traffic from that Facebook page that you maintain or from your Twitter account? Where are people coming from? What content is being looked at? That's going to be the key to finding that information out. And that's, again, like with writing for the web, that is something Tabby and I have done, you know, full-day pre-conferences at ALA about that. So if you really want to see sort of behind the scenes what's happening and where the movement on your web page is, I would recommend getting into your Google Analytics dashboard and having a look at that. And to shameless self-promotion here to promote the books. Tabby and I actually wrote 2 books. We have a lot of really practical advice for, you know, getting the information that you want out of your website statistics. You know, what should we report to the board? Do they want to know hits? Do they want to know content? Or do they just want to know how many visitors? That kind of thing. So that's the short answer to what is a kind of not complicated necessarily, but a complex process. So web statistics, web analytics.
Okay. Someone asked, we have 5 staff, including me, no departments, and our website support is hired out, so we don't have much control over the format, and we don't have time to devote to planning. We don't have much time to devote to planning web content, so we do some. So what do you do in that situation when you, like with the smaller staffs? You know, how do you fulfill those roles, or when you don't have a lot of control?
Right. Well, you like anything, I mean, you need to, you know, to sort of manage any resource, you need some combination of time and money. And it could be something, you know, if there's just 5 of you and you all sort of collaboratively manage the website, to sort of carve out some time. And I know this is really, really extremely difficult in smaller libraries, but if you don't give the website care and feeding, it won't be able to grow. And the other sort of side of that is, if you don't have time to develop a lot of fancy content, you know, maybe you don't need to. Maybe you focus on 1 or 2 things, like a little events carousel like that one, to sort of get people interested. Find out where you would get sort of the most bang for your buck, and I mean buck in terms of both time and money resources. I would start, maybe if it's just the 5 of you, sort of sit down and look at who's doing what, sort of ad hoc, and you need to, again, you need to look at job descriptions, you need to look at workflow, and sort of sit down and realistically define, okay, how can we do this? And, you know, don't overshoot. If you can't build a big fancy website, don't. Build something that you can manage, that you can control, that you can keep looking fresh and nice. And maybe you just have like a little events carousel, maybe you have a blog, and each of you can, you know, write a blog, commit to writing a blog post once a week. So that would be, you know, 5 people. You would have to write, you know, 1 short blog post about, hey, this is what's going on at the library, once a month. So sit down and just sort of look realistically at what you can do. And again, if you have access to those web statistics, you'll know what people are looking at and where you can invest time and money. And also you can just, I'm assuming if there's 5 of you, that probably all of you interact with patrons every day, ask them what they want. What kind of content would they like to see on the website? I think a lot of times, like in academic libraries, we spend a lot of time, you know, writing up these LibGuides, these long help documents. And statistics show that people don't really read that. I mean, think about your own use of the web. How often do you use, outside of work, how often do you sort of look at, help documentation, that kind of thing? So you can do some sort of, guerrilla usability. ask what people would like to see on the website, and sort of scope it out, build it very carefully, and don't take on more than you can. There are ways to create attractive, effective websites that aren't sort of overly complicated and for a lot of training information.
A few people at the beginning asked Nina, or you had asked about what their role is, and these were a few of the responses. Someone had mentioned currently not a real web presence, working to update it. Someone said, I am the web person, trained a little on Drupal, but have good support from our system. Another person said, I'm the digital services librarian, which is a position title. Within the reference department, I'm in charge, but there isn't a lot of time devoted to it. Another person mentioned she's the web person for the adult information. The children's librarian takes care of children content. It's kind of been dumped in our lap, and for me, it's kind of an afterthought. So that was some of the responses that I received.
Okay. Like with anything, it begins with communication. Hammer out together what you want to do. Who can do what. If someone can take on a little bit more, and really, there's been a theme throughout friendship for the past couple years, especially with the economy and our it's the way they've been. We have to do more with less. So let's get things more efficiently in a way that we don't burn ourselves out, determining what's a priority, what is paying, before all the economy and everything hit before, and so sort of trying to make a space and time for that now when we're struggling to sort of maintain basic services and that kind of thing. It's really difficult, but you can do it sort of incrementally, and maybe say, if you're in management's position, say, okay, this year we'll try adding this kind of content to the library's website, and this person will do this part, this person will do this part, and really look at their job descriptions, really look at what your expectations of them are, and make sure that it's something they can do. Because, I mean, the short answer is your website will not grow itself. You do need to devote time and resources to that, but you really need to sort of think critically and prioritize how it fits in with everything else. You can't stop cataloging books altogether so you have a website.
Sure.
If you have a website that didn't catalog books, then there's no reason for people to come to the library.
We have time for one more question that came in. Someone asked, do you feel it is more effective to have events listed on your homepage or to have a separate events page?
I think events are a good homepage content just because you want to have a lot of fresh content on the homepage. You want to have, like if I go back to, let me bring up the Auraria slide, or the Arapaho slide here.
And these slides will be available to all of you as well.
Yeah. You want to have, so just looking at this screen, this navigation up here stays the same, and then the fat footer, this big red footer at the bottom, always stays the same. This need help stays the same. But then these two areas here, we have this carousel, this sort of book cover carousel, and then we have this sort of events area. You want places, if you think about the layout of your homepage, you want to identify places where you're going to have content change. So people will always know, okay, I get help by clicking this big red button. The policies, if users ever want to look at policies, that kind of thing is always in the bottom down here. Navigation gets people to basic information. And you can see here we do have programs and classes. There is a separate events page, but this is done in Drupal, so it's very easy to have. This is done with a view here on the home page. It's very easy to have. Let me sort of, I really don't want to leave the webinar. I can bring up that page. I have it here. So we have this events, it sort of cycles through here, and you can make a change by mousing over it. It's just a way to get people, it's to make your website kind of sticky. It's to get people to come back and see, okay, what's new. We have this Children's Book Day celebration, Colorado musicians. That's probably related to something from programming. But if you click on programs and classes here, there is a separate page, and you can advertise the URL for this separately, arapahoelibraries.org / programs and classes. That's a little bit long. I maybe would have done /events looking back at it. And then you can have, there's the same information that changes up here. Oops, they don't have 4 in there right now. But then there are other ways to browse programs if you're just looking for children, teens, that kind of thing. So I would say both. I think it's worth having a dedicated events page. where you can sort through and see everything that's going on. But then the idea here was to, on the homepage, to sort of let people know, when we did usability testing at Arapahoe, people said, yeah, I'm coming here to check, my holds, my fines, view my checkouts, that kind of thing. They didn't necessarily even realize that this kind of information was in there, so that's why this got kind of this prominent place here on the website. So the short answer is both.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of you for listening in and for sticking with us to the end. I apologize for some of the audio issues we had. As I mentioned, the slides will be available to you in the follow-up email, as well as a recording as well. So you can take some time and look at more of that stuff. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening in. Thank you, Nina, for sharing all of that excellent content. You certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. So again, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and have a great rest of your week as well.
And please feel free to follow up. This is my Twitter handle here, NinerMac, and my contact information for my website, ninermac.net. If you have a question that I didn't answer, something that's specific to your library, please reach out. I'm happy to talk to you. Again, the libraries that I've worked in are bigger, and I'd like to really explore how content strategy could work in smaller environments as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Nina.
Thanks, Jamie.